You are listening to Crossroads Church, bringing a real God to real people.
There's nothing worse than feeling forgotten. So a few years, when we were growing up in Guatemala, I grew up in Central America in Guatemala City, but we lived about 30 minutes outside of Guatemala City on a mountain that I actually overlooked the city. And one Sunday after church, there's the whole family of us, there's 5 of us. We went to church, and then we went to this restaurant called Rosti Pollo. It's a yummy roasted chicken place. And we had our lunch, and then we took off and went back home, and it was a 30-minute drive home. And so we're all joking and laughing in the car, and we get home and get into the house, and we start, talking, doing our thing Sunday afternoon, some of us getting ready to take a nap, and my mom goes, "Hey, have you seen Jonathan?" That's my little brother. Now, Jonathan was like 8 at the time. It's just an 8-year-old kid. I'm like 14. He's 6 years younger than me, and I talked about Jonathan last week. He's just the most easygoing, personable kid. Like, he never had a curfew, because my parent one time asked him, like, "Why don't you give him a curfew?" And they said, "Oh, it's Jonathan. He would never do anything wrong." I'm like, so this is my brother, and we were all of a sudden, I was like, I bet he's joking around with us. I bet he's in the car hiding in the back. So I went, we go and look in the car. It's this big old Suburban. We look in the middle seat. He's not there. Back seat, not there. Very back seat, not there. So we start realizing, did anybody talk to him on the drive home? And remember, there's only 5 of us. Like, you'd think you would have noticed there's only 4 of us now, right? It's not like we're 10 kids all piled into a van. We realized we left Jonathan, I think. So we all jump back in the car, and we drive 30 minutes back down the mountain. An hour has passed at this point, maybe more. And there we pull up to the chicken restaurant, and there's my little 8-year-old brother standing out there trying to be brave. And as soon as he saw us, he just broke into tears and ran to my dad. I think about that moment a lot because, man, there are a lot of times in life where I'm really trying to be brave, but I just want some assurance that somebody's coming for me. Like, when's the cavalry coming here? Because I'm tired, and I'm worn out, and I'm tired of being strong. And we all get to a point in our life where we feel forgotten. It may be in your marriage. It may be at work. Maybe technology's moving on, and nobody seems to care about what you brought to the table back in the day. And the worst feeling of all is feeling like God forgot you. In fact, it's one thing to do something like against God's will, to do something wrong and then feel apart from God. But it's a whole new level of despair when you're trying your hardest to honor God and he's still quiet. And I've found this. I'm going to get real for some of you. It may be uncomfortable, but this is a real God, real people. That's our motto here at the church, right? This is very real for you. I've found that the longer you walk with God, the more silent he seems to get sometimes. I see a lot of times that when you first come to Jesus, man, these people, I love watching people who have just come to Jesus, and they ask him for anything, and he's just pouring out all these things and answering, and they're hearing his voice, and he's like, God told me this, God told me that. And I've been hanging out in the church for about 40 years, and I don't hear much from God anymore, at least in the way I would like to hear from God. I believe don't get me wrong, I believe he's always speaking. But man, you ever had those situations where you're like, God, I have been calling out for my health, man. This thing that the doctor said, I have just been crying out to you, Lord, take this away. The pain is so unbearable. But I'm still not better. And I don't hear anything from God. I'm like, God, just at least throw me a bone or something. Like maybe one day of no pain, right? Or maybe you're in a relationship and you're saying, man, the relationship is just struggling. It's been a struggle since the day one. And I've been calling out to God, Lord, make my marriage stronger, make my marriage stronger. But you're sitting there and you just feel like he's completely silent to the cries that you're calling out for that marriage to get stronger. Maybe financially, you've been trying your hardest to get out of the financial troubles you're in, and it's just not getting better. And things actually seem to be going from worse to worser, if that was a word. And you just go, God, what's going on here? And man, it gets frustrating. And here's what I've found. Like the religious side of me, I grew up in church, right? So the religious side of me, I want to make excuses for God. And this is often what I say is, well, I guess I've got some secret sin in my life I just don't know about that's hindering God coming through for me. And listen, I don't buy that. Listen, when you are sinning, you are going against the will of God, but I don't believe that God withholds his voice because of that. Because a lot of us cried out to God in our worst sin and he came to us. So if you're in that this morning and you're just like, man, I'm at the bottom and I know it. Hey, you can cry out to God and he'll listen, I guarantee it. But there's a level that comes with maturity where it's like as you get more mature in Christ, he stops, it seems like he gets a little less communicative, and it's very easy to feel forgotten by God. And there's nothing that brings more despair than feeling like God has forgotten you. And no matter how much you cry out to him, no matter how much you ask for him to bail you out or help you, it just seems like it's silent. And you've cried tears. You've said, Lord, make me heal my body. Lord, help my marriage. Lord, get our finances in order. Lord, just help my child come back to you. Lord, I feel so lonely. I feel so lonely. Are you going to give me send somebody my way so I don't feel lonely? And then he just stays silent. So we're going to talk about that today. What do you do when you feel forgotten by God? Because we all get to that some point. If we're honest, and some of us make excuses, but the reality is this: there are times when God's just not going to be speaking. And what do you do when that happens? What do you do? Do you give in to despair, or do you hold on? So let me start off with the good news this morning. God has not forgotten you. Remember that. He hasn't forgotten you. No matter how alone, by yourself, abandoned, maybe rejected you feel, God has not forgotten you. We're looking at the story of Joseph. And, Joseph, God gave him a dream early on. We talked last week about this dream. Joseph was the youngest child. He came from a completely dysfunctional family. I'm not going to go into the dysfunction. If you want to listen to the message on last week's message, it's on the app. Joseph comes from a totally dysfunctional family, has brothers who literally hate him. And Joseph has this dream that God's going to use him to be a leader. And in this dream, the stars all bow down to him, and he believes they represent his brothers. So he tells his brothers, and that doesn't go well. They're like, who do you think you are? And a lot of us, some of the dreams you have for your family, you've told some of your family about it, and they've told you the same thing. Who do you think you are? Don't you know people that have our skin color don't do that kind of thing? Don't you know that people come from Seguin don't do that kind of thing? Don't you know that people are our family? Who do you think? Do you think you're better than us? That's literally what they said to Joseph. Do you think you're better than us? So Joseph has another dream, and he tells the dream again. You'd think you would have learned the first time. Didn't go well. Tells the dream again, and they hate him even more. And that's where we ended last week. We said God will oftentimes give you a glimpse of something he has for you, and it'll happen in your youth. It was something before people told you couldn't do that or before the disappointments hit. And so what I left you with last week is I want to encourage you, kind of revisit some of those dreams that God put in your heart, because they're not dead. The dreams that God put in your heart, they're not dead. Only he gets to tell you when a dream's dead. And you'll know when it's dead when you're dead. If you're still alive, there's still things in you that God wants to accomplish. And you feel like you wasted maybe the best of years of your life and time has passed, too much time has passed, but it hasn't. And we're going to talk about that today. So Joseph, things go from bad to worse for Joseph. First of all, he's got a dysfunctional family. Family hates him. His father sends him and says, Joseph, I want you to take your brothers some stuff out in the field. They're watching the sheep. And as the brothers see Joseph coming, they say, there's that goober of a brother we have again. I hate that guy. Let's kill him. Well, one of the brothers is like, let's not kill him. I've got a better idea. Let's sell him as a slave. So they end up selling their brother as a slave. Then they take his coat of many colors, put blood on it, and go back to their father and say, oh no, look, I think a wild animal killed him. And Joseph is meantime, Mr. Dreamer Joseph, who had all these big hopes and dreams, in one instant, all of it gets shattered. And he ends up probably handcuffed and shackled and marched down to Egypt, to another country, on his own. And that's where we pick up today's story. But I want to remind you of something, first of all. As we're reading the story of Joseph and things go from bad to worse, the premise of this whole series is this right here. God's dream for you is bigger and better than any dream you have for yourself. And you have to keep this in mind, because as you read Joseph's story and as you think about your story, it's easy to forget that God, you're his vision. You're his dream. He wants to do something in you. And he gets to decide what he wants to do in you. And this is what my dad always says. He says, God's dream for you is what your dream would be if you knew all the details. That's his plan for your life, is what your plan would be if you knew all the details. The problem is, we don't know all the details. And so we're left down here kind of trying to figure it out. And some of us, we feel like we've been sold into slavery. So Joseph, that's where we pick up his story. Joseph gets sold into slavery. He'd been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of the Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. So you can imagine, Joseph gets taken down to this foreign land, mistreated, I'm sure. They didn't treat slaves well back in the day. Slavery in general isn't where you're treated well. And he's sold up there, and somebody bid money on him, and said, I'll take that guy. He looks like he could do a lot of work. Buys the guy, and now he's the owner. He has an owner. A man owns him, a guy named Potiphar. And this is where the Bible verse starts to offend me, honestly. Here's what it says. The Lord was with Joseph. What? If the Lord was with Joseph, this would have never happened in the first place, in my book, right? If the Lord was really with Joseph, everything wouldn't have hit the fan in Joseph's life. But here's the thing. It's easy for Moses, the guy who Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Pentateuch, the 5 books of the New Testament. Moses knows the end of the story. So he says, look, the Lord is with Joseph. And he became a successful man. And he was in the house of his Egyptian master as a slave. We forget that part. The dude was still a slave. He couldn't go anywhere. He had no say over his life. His master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. Now think about this. This is what's offensive to me. The Lord was with Joseph. Now look, it's easy for a narrator to tell you that at the end of the story. Moses is looking back 500 years later, says, yeah, the Lord was with Joseph. You think Joseph knew that? Joseph's a slave. He got mistreated by his brothers, sold into slavery, and now he's a slave. Sure, things are okay with him. He's got the best slave gig you can get, but you're still a slave. And he says, the Lord is with Joseph. And I'm thinking, that's easy for him to say, but man, what would it have been like for Joseph? And I got to thinking about in our lives. Man, when things get really hard, life gets challenging, and sometimes we feel so alone and abandoned. But could you imagine what it would be like if we had a narrator for our lives? So as soon as you got that notice that says you're now being laid off by your company, you heard, but God is with you. Would that not be reassuring? Or you get the letter that says your spouse is filing for divorce. But God is with you. You're like, oh, all right. God hasn't forgotten me. Or you get the diagnosis from the doctor, you're going to be struggling with this for the next 20 years. But God is with you. Can you imagine? That would be really reassuring, to have a booming narrator voice saying, hey, God didn't forget you, buddy. I know it sucks, but God didn't forget you. That would be super reassuring. Unfortunately, most of us don't have a personal narrator. But you know what? You can be your own narrator. And that brings me to my first point this morning. This is something that I have to live every day, guys. What I'm sharing with you right now, I'm preaching to myself. Every day, we must remind ourselves that God did not bring us this far to ditch us. You got to remember that. Because I have days when I just feel like, man, God just completely forgot me. Like I've been calling out for this one thing and things just keep going from bad to worse. And I have to remind myself, God did a lot of good stuff in the past. And some of you guys, man, where God brought you from, you look at yourself today, you're like, wow. Think about this. It would be a complete fool. God would be a fool if he took you that far, brought all that, changed all that in your life, brought you this far and just said, I'm done with you now. No way. You're just now ready for what he's got for you. And I got to remember that sometimes because, man, I look back and I'm like, man, he used to do all this stuff and I guess he's done with me now because he's been so silent for a while. But listen to me. Every day you've got to become your own narrator. God is with me. It feels like he's not there. It feels like I'm alone, but God is with me. And we have to remind ourselves every day because don't ever forget this, man. If you're still alive, the vision is still alive that God has for you. It'll be over when you stand before him face to face. You'll know it. It'll be real clear that it's over. And then everything will be taken care of anyway, right? But in the meantime, you're not done. Your best days are ahead because it says the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn. It shines brighter and brighter. He who began a good work in you, he'll be faithful to complete it. But the lie the enemy wants to tell you is this: God forgot you. He forgot you. Yeah, he did good stuff for you back then, but man, you must have done something to mess it up. And that's why he's so silent. And he doesn't have bigger plans for you. I mean, how can you top that anyways? What God did. He already delivered you from this. How can you top that? And so we start to believe the lie that, man, maybe God's done with me. Maybe he's forgotten me. Maybe my best days are behind me. So Joseph, he's faithful, right? He's faithful, but then here's what happens. his boss's wife tries to put a move on him, and she says, hey, come sleep with me. But Joseph refuses her. So she gets mad, and she tells a lie and says, Joseph tried to put a move on me. And as soon as the master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, he said, this is the way your servant treated me? Now, this is kind of unjust here, because Joseph was this like totally legit, loyal guy in charge of the whole place, but the master immediately believes his wife. Immediately believes his wife. And he says, this is the way you did it. And his anger was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. Things went from bad to worse to worser for Joseph. But God was with him. Really? Really? Was God really with him? Like, that's the thing you start to ask. And so here's my second point with this. Whenever you're struggling, feels like God has forgotten you, maybe the dream has been abandoned, maybe you feel like you're all alone, you feel like you're rejected, there will always be an opportunity for instant gratification that will alleviate your pain and it'll distract you from the dream. Always. Think about Joseph, man. He was a slave. And the master's wife decided she wanted to sleep with him. Things could have gotten really good for Joseph for a while. The master was gone for days at a time. Joseph could have been like, hey, special treatment from the master's wife. Could have also gotten a lot of pleasure out of it. But he said, no. I'm so confident that God has a plan and a purpose for me that I'm not going to hijack it with instant gratification that promises to alleviate my pain right now. And there's always a chance to alleviate your pain. You think about, like, if you have a business, maybe the business is struggling. You say, man, God, I've been faithful in giving. The business we've been telling the truth, loyal, honest people. But the business is struggling, and we don't know how we're going to make rent this month. And then an opportunity arises for you to maybe overcharge somebody a little bit, and they're never going to notice. Or tweak the numbers in such a way that this could be over here, and you can move things around a little bit, and nobody will know, but you'll be able to make rent this month. There's always this chance to compromise. Maybe you've had a vision to have a great, strong marriage. Man, but things are a little rough. The marriage is hitting a rough patch. You and your wife kind of at each other's throats. And then all of a sudden at work, they hire this wonderful new young female. And she's so wonderful. And she thinks you're great. She brings you coffee. And you've got this dream for a good marriage. But, man, it's not going well. And you're like, man, I don't know. It's probably going to go from bad to worse. And what if we end up getting divorced? And maybe I need a backup plan. And there's this girl here. And she starts texting you. And listen to me. I'm telling you, I don't have any data on this, but I work with a lot of people that have messed up their lives through infidelity. It all starts with texting. So some of y'all, you need to change your phone number, okay? Because it's already started, and you know it, and it's providing a little bit of it's that little jolt that you get. We're like, woo, a little dopamine shot, and you're like, yeah. Oh, she thinks I'm great. She texted me, and, hey, it starts with that. And there's always a chance, because the enemy, remember, he wants to sidetrack you. He sees the potential that's in you. He sees what's in you. Man, he's been around a long time. He sees the potential in people, and he says, man, if I can just distract them from what God's put in them by letting them settle for smaller pleasures that'll just keep them distracted for now. He wants to distract you, and there's always an opportunity for instant gratification. Always an opportunity to go. It's just, Abraham with Abraham and Isaac. God promised Abraham he'd have a son. But his wife's over 90 years old, and Abraham starts to go, I don't know if this is going to happen. So he ends up compromising what God had, and they end up giving a child named Ishmael, and it causes all of this conflict, a lot of the conflict we're still dealing with today, because there was a moment for instant gratification, making an excuse for God. Well, maybe God meant it this way, but really God was saying, no, I meant what I said, but you've got to stay true, and you've got to hold on. And that's what Joseph did. He said, you know what? Nope, I could compromise here. I could get a little pleasure over here. I could make my job a little bit easier, but I'm going to do what's right. And you know what? Here's the thing, guys. Sometimes you'll do the right thing, and it'll get worse. There's your good news for this morning. Put that on an encouraging card. Sometimes you'll do the right thing, and things will get worse. But that's the reality of it. Sometimes you'll do the right thing, and it'll get worse. But here's where the verse picks up. There's this crazy line again. But the Lord is with Joseph after he got thrown in prison, and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in prison. Remember, the dude's still in prison. Yeah, it's great. He's the manager of the prison, and he's in prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. And some of you guys this morning, man, you may feel like you're in prison. Your job, you're like, man, I am in prison. And I have sent out 100 resumes trying to get out of this prison. I have done everything I can. And it's not happening. It's just, I have tried and tried. Some of you guys, you've been trying to get your marriage to improve, and you've tried counseling, you've tried books, and it's just not happening. And inside you're like, man, God, get me out of here. And he's quiet and he's silent. And you're like, what's going on? I feel like I'm in prison. And I think Joseph felt that. And he had to remind himself, you know what, though? I know God's with me. I'm not going to compromise, and not compromising is what got me here. So the next question you have to ask is, what are you trying to show me, God? Like, what's going on here? Because I've tried to get out of this prison, and it is clear that you want me to be here. Now, little caveat, if you do dumb things and go against God's will, you will suffer for it, okay? What I'm talking about here is when you're trying to do the right thing, and it ends up landing you in an even worse place, and the dream just seems like it's impossible, okay? That's what I'm talking about here. And some of you guys, that's where you're at. You're like, I've been working hard for my employer, but I cannot work around this environment anymore. I'm in a prison here, and I cannot work around these people anymore. They're bringing me down. But God isn't opening up a door anywhere else. And what do I do? Maybe you're in your marriage. You're like, I know I shouldn't get divorced, but man, he's not changing. He's just not changing. And when you're in prison, here's the thing. There will be times in life where the reasons God's silent is because he wants you to just stick with the last thing he told you. If you don't hear anything from him, you ask yourself, what's the last thing he told me? Because here's the thing about God. Remember, you're his vision. He's got a plan for you. And what he has for you is way bigger than anything you can come up with for yourself. In fact, if you saw what he had for you, it'd probably scare you, which is why he only lets you see it in little glimpses. You go, I could never do that. Here's the thing about it. When you get to that place and you feel like you're in a prison, I love this verse in 2 Corinthians, who actually written from a guy who was in prison, said this, we don't lose heart, guys. We don't lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away. Can you imagine Joseph thinking, these are the best years of my life. I'm in my 20s, man. I'm in shape. I'm looking good, and I'm in prison. He must have felt like the best years of his life were wasted. He says, even though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light momentary affliction, the suffering you're going through right now, the pain that you're going through, the struggle, the silence from God that you're going through right now, I love this next line, is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. What this makes me think of is a big old, you ever seen those big old jackets that have Christmas lights all over them and they're just bright and light? You ever seen those? Where just people walk up and you're like, whoa, turn off the jacket, buddy. That's what I think of when I think of the weight of glory. God's got this jacket he wants to put on you, and it is so bright and shiny that when people look at it, they're going to go, whoa, I cannot believe what I'm seeing. But it's a heavy jacket. And right now, you're not strong enough to carry it. What God has for you, you're going to have to be really strong, because what he's got planned for you, you're going to have to get strong. But you know how you get stronger? Through the challenges and the struggle of walking through this life. He says, look, I've got this bright jacket I want to put on you. I want to put it on you, man, to where the world's like, look at this. This is incredible. It's beyond all comparison. So here's what we do. We look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. And this is hard, because when you're in prison, all you can see is the prison bars, the wall, the goober next to you in the prison bars. And he says, you got to stop looking at what you see around you. Because here's the thing. We look to what's not what's seen, but what's unseen. For the things that are unseen or things that are seen are transient. They're passing. This stuff that you're going through, it didn't come to stay. It came to pass. But the things that are unseen are eternal. And you know what's unseen? It's what God is doing inside of you. And this is the struggle of it. Change is so slow and so incremental that most of us are too close to ourselves to see the change. Other people can see it. There's this girl that she was so angry and cynical and bitter that in my college group, like 12, 15 years ago, she was there. And first time I met her, I'm like, man, this girl has major attitude. But she stuck around. And she ended up accepting Christ. She was so cynical and so bitter at the world. And I saw her a couple days ago. She's got her family, godly husband, 3 kids. And she is just glowing with, I can't even describe it other than the weight of glory. And I see her and I'm like, And she's hard on herself. She's like, I'm so cynical and bitter. I'm like, are you kidding? You're a totally different woman than you were back there. But the change is so slow, you just don't see it. So that's where I love the way Paul says it here, but there's this other translation called the Message. It's kind of a transliteration of it, and this is the way he describes this verse, and I love it. He says this, we're not giving up. I know it's really hard. I know it's really bad. I know I feel like I'm in prison. I know there's a lot of opportunities to compromise, but we're not giving up. How could we? Even though on the outside, it often looks like things are falling apart on us, which every one of us is there at some point, on the inside, where God is making new life, not a day goes by without his unfolding grace. God is pouring into you. He's making you into who he wants you to be. And even when he's silent, and even when you're struggling, you better not doubt this. He's working something inside of you that you need to be able to carry that awesome weight of glory that he wants to put on you. These hard times, they are small potatoes. This is not literal translation. Compared to the coming good times, the lavish celebration prepared for us. There's far more here than meets the eye. You're seeing what you see around you and it looks hopeless, but there's way more going on here. There's something going on inside of you. The things we see now are here today, gone tomorrow, but the things we can't see, the stuff God's building into you, the strength he's putting into you through everything you're going through his silence, everything you're working through right now, all of that is going to last forever. So here's my final point. God is always more concerned about who you're becoming than what you're doing. And this is good news, because some of you feel like you're in a prison at work. And you say, I don't think I can handle another day of this. And God is saying, hey, you can. I'm going to give you the strength to do it, because, man, I'm building something into you right now, this determination, this strength in you that you're going to need for the next assignment. But you got to learn it right here, and this is the best way to do it. Because remember, God's plan for you is what your plan would be if you knew all the details. He knows exactly what you need. And he's way more concerned about who you're becoming, because who you're becoming, listen, what you do is going to change, right? That might change. But who you are in the middle of it, that is what's going to live on and on and on. And his goal is to make you into his image. He wants you to look like him when it's all said and done, which is glorious and shiny and bright and amazing. And he wants that for you. And that's what he's saying. He says, guys, listen, I know it looks bad on the outside. And man, I know you want me to throw you a bone and give you my voice, but I'm telling you, just stick with that last thing I told you. Just go, keep going for it. Don't give up. Don't lose heart. I know it's not looking good out there. The clouds are rolling in. Things are bad. It seems like it's going from bad to worse. But listen, remind yourself every day, God didn't bring you this far to ditch you. Don't seize that instant gratification that promises to take a little bit of the pain away. And you say, well, at least I can get a little bit of the pain away, but it might hijack your future. And then finally, remember this. What God's building into you is preparing you for what he has ahead. And wherever he's got you right now, man, if it's a bad situation, try and get out of it. But if it's clear he's got you there, and you know in your heart he's got you there, stick it out. Don't give up. Be encouraged. God has a purpose for you right where you are, and he's taking you somewhere good. I can guarantee it, because, man, his plan for you is way bigger than any plan you have for yourself. Don't give up on the dream that he's put in your heart of having that marriage that you dreamed of, having that financial stability so you can give and be generous that he's put in your heart, seeing your kids come to the Lord or come back to the Lord, or getting free of that addiction. Don't give up on that dream. And if it gets harder and harder, stay true, stay fast to it, because God's working something in you. He's got a big plan for you. And just like Joseph, he says, listen, and let me just so you know, for the next 3 weeks, the story does get better. Joseph's life is like down, 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 and then it's overnight. You see, bam, him lifted to where he's supposed to be. And God works that way so much, man, because, you know, one touch of his favor can launch you into the future. One touch of his favor can heal your body. One touch of his favor can he can put you in front of people you never thought you could ever be in front of in a million years. And he puts you there, and then when he moves, man, he moves quick. And we're going to see that. So don't give up. Hang on. Hang on, hang on. And I'm preaching this to myself because, man, listen, I've struggled my whole life with depression and major fear. And I'm actually in a season of it right now where I'm struggling, man, like hard with fear. It just hits me. It's like I wake up with this anxiety just kind of just out there. And I don't know how to describe it other than it's just like this nameless anxiety. But I have to remind myself that in the past, I've just seen over and over again that it gets darkest right before the sun comes out. And so I know I'm on the verge of some sort of a breakthrough. It's probably more information you care to hear, but I know I'm on search for some sort of breakthrough. But in the meantime, I have to remind myself that God has not forgotten me. He has not forgotten me. He is there with me. I wish I had my narrator, but I have to be that narrator for myself. He didn't bring me this far to ditch me. And the same is true for every one of you guys. So if you're struggling with depression, fear, anxiety, panic, worry, whatever it is, man, I'm right there with you in the battle with you. You wake up every morning and you say, I'm not going to go this direction in my mind. I'm not going to compromise. I'm going to stay true to what God has put in me because he's working something in me. I don't know what it is, but I know that it's going to be beautiful.
Thanks for listening. For more, visit www.crossroadsc.com.